In this video, I'm going to show you how I converted these Hot Wheels cars into Gaslands races, including how you can scratch build weapons and drivers from simple everyday items. Welcome to Cheap and Easy Wargaming, where we keep the hobby fun, fast and affordable. So whilst I personally think for Gaslands you can't beat the aesthetic of the classic 50s style cars or the 70s muscle cars, I did want to mix that up a little bit for the sake of this video, which is one of the reasons that I've chosen this blue car, and in order to show you one of the ways in which I scratch build drivers, I'm going to be using this muscle car. The second and most important reason I chose this car is because the body of it is plastic and the base is metal. If you're just starting out with converting Gaslands and you don't have access to drills or Dremels, then the plastic bodies are a brilliant way to go. As you can see here with a crosshead screwdriver, it doesn't take all that much effort in order to wear down that plastic rivet, allowing you then to take the car apart and easily access all of that funky stuff inside. And you might be surprised sometimes to see just how much detail Hot Wheels do put into the insides of the cars. I wouldn't have thought they'd be designed with the expectation that grown men are going to be going at them with power tools. But here's the third and final reason I chose this car. It's already got a driver. The holy grail of Hot Wheels conversions. It's got what seems to be two little gas canisters at the side of the driver there, which just further reinforces the fact I wanted to stick a flamethrower on this, as well as just some really funky engine detailing as well. I want all that to show through at the end, so I get rid of the windscreen, and it's already got these very convenient holes at the top that I'm going to be using for threading some wire, and you'll see why later. Making things slightly harder than they need to be, I removed the back wheels. Those cutters are for jewelry making, so they do struggle a bit with the axles. Popping the shell back on, I just want to test the sizing with a wheel I've cut off an older, different car at some point in the past. This is just to give it a more rugged off-road look. To create another axle for the new wheels, just simply straighten out a paper clip. And whilst we'll shortly see that I've made a very obvious and glaring mistake here, this is still a good bit to see if you are going to stick the same size wheels on. As you see, the paperclip axle will slide straight back through the original axle pincher bits. And then when I stick the body back on, I realise that those back wheels are way too big for it to be able to set back on its base properly. Obviously, if you're using similar size wheels, then you shouldn't really have that problem. So for my next trick, I decided to cut another axle, but longer this time, and have the wheels laid wide each side of the car. But once I see them both in place, I just don't like it. They don't look like they actually belong to the car. They look like they've just been stuck on the side. Which lands us perfectly at option 3, which involves the axle being the original length and just being glued to the underside of the car instead. Obviously not having the same strength and stability as if it was going through the original axle holes. And as I find the term axle holes difficult to say, from this point forth in the video, I'm just going to refer to them as A-holes, which I find rolls off the tongue much more fluidly. I quite like this rugged off-road look we've got going on with the car at the minute. I think it really feeds into the Gaslands theme, and as such I'm going to remove the big spoiler at the back and that front spoiler, I believe it's called a splitter, from the front. I am really sorry if that upsets anyone. I guess I should have put a spoiler alert at the front of the video. For the main body and the barrel of the flamethrower, I'm going to use this round sprue. What I just did there was as close as I've ever been to actually measuring something. I wanted to keep this support sticking out at the bottom just to give it a little bit of extra, well, support really. What I did realise when I put the whole car together at the end is that having the larger back wheels then made the flamethrower angle down slightly. So in hindsight, I should have had that support a little bit longer just to bring the barrel of the gun pointing horizontally, but hey, live and learn. Despite the excellent paint job I'm about to do on that flamethrower, I didn't want the whole thing looking like it was just a painted sprue. So I wanted the body of it to look slightly different to the barrel. And in all kinds of builds, for all kinds of things, I use the edges of these lids, like food container lids, butter, this one happens to be soft cheese. But the edges of these lids have a 3D shape that once they're glued in a certain way and painted cleverly, they can give really good details. And here you can see I'm just simply resting that shape over the top of the sprue, and that gives a more squared effect. So easy, it can be cut down with scissors to whatever size you want. But what I wish I'd done here is left it a little bit longer at the end, so there's a bit more of an overhang for when I glue the cables in later. Again, you'll see it would have just given it a little bit more strength and hold. I'm threading the headphone wire through the holes and leaving that in place just so I remember later that that needs to be a thing. While we're on the subject of the headphone cables, I did come back to this car after I'd done the glamour shots at the end, and I felt I'd left those cables too long, so I've since trimmed them down, and this is what it looks like now. which I, for one, think is a massive improvement. Another little detail to add in a bid to stop this from looking like a piece of plastic sprue is this pipe underneath the barrel, which will have the pilot light. There's probably a proper flamethrower name for that, but for now we'll just call it the pilot light. And that's done again, just simply using a piece of paperclip. The longest strip will form the attachment to the bottom of the barrel, which actually would have been a good name for this channel now I think about it. And then we're just going to bend a small V into the other end, which is where the pilot flame is going to be lit. I will be doing a slight variation on this for the next car, but I'm not going to tell you about that now because, as you know, I don't like spoilers. This plastic stick came free with a balloon that was incidentally also free. My kids were living their best life that day. As you can see, it's got all kinds of interesting shapes. The main length of it is this kind of cross shape. As always, it can be very easily cut down into these spiky rams that look like they've been cut from metal girders, and they can be added to the fronts or sides of your cars also to count as rams. But here, just to do something a little bit different, I'm going to attach it to the back of the car, and by cutting a small cone kind of shaped piece, you can glue these onto any of the wheels to be tire shredders, which in Gaslands could also count as rams, which I find is a nice little workaround for side-mounted rams. Now I've got all that talk of ramming out of my system, we can move on and never mention rams again. So happy in my blissful ignorance that that car was ready to paint, I decided to move on to this guy. Not only is this an awesome looking car, but I also wanted to show one of the few ways that I use of making Gasland scale miniature drivers. So in the last few years I've been very lucky in that I've been able to find miniatures that would fit the scale well in various places. Sabutio games, the army figures here, also miniature railway model kind of characters. But for years before that, I had nothing. I've tried a few different ways, some of them better than others, and I'll show some videos of different ones later on. To the outside observer, I might seem like a man who's quite lucky, in that a woman has agreed to spend the rest of her life with me. So while there's a number of pros and cons to this, they're probably best discussed with my therapist. For now, what I want to be focusing on is having found these amazing little things lying around the house. She tries to tell me it's for curling hair, but as far as I'm concerned, it's a Hot Wheels scale car wash. Once you take off the fuzzy blue thing, you're left with this, and just seeing that plastic tube on its own sends my imagination racing in 100 different directions all at once. But for now, I need to try and stay on topic, and I'm just going to use some clever cutting to create what's basically an X shape. And this is basically going to be the torso and thighs of your driver. I'm cutting the shoulders into slightly more of a point, and that's just so that the bead that glues onto the head just has a slightly better fitting and it looks better as shoulders. Using your pliers, you just bend up the bottom and that will form the legs. Very often when making drivers for Hot Wheels cars or similar brands, there's nowhere for the lower legs to go, so usually just having the thighs like this works quite well. Obviously you can play around with the cars you've got, see what fits, but ultimately it's just exactly the same process, you just leave the legs a bit longer. Trying him in for size, and this is all going far too well so far. Now, if you have a small ball anywhere in your bits box that would be the right scale for the head, you are winning. Just glue it on, job's a good one. However, try as I might, looking through all of my random bits of plastic and beyond, really scouring the house for anything, I couldn't find anything that was small enough to be a head. And yes, this is me considering using a piece of polystyrene to break off the individual little balls it's made up of, but they were too small. In the end, I had to go with the smallest bead I could find in my daughter's jewellery making box. And obviously when I say my daughter's jewellery making box, I mean my jewellery making box, but I let her play with it sometimes, as long as she doesn't use some of the special pieces. Here where I've cut the shoulders into a slight point with the intention of that point inserting slightly into the bead hole. I really need to work on my phrasing. If I'd instead cut that point into a little stick kind of thing, then that would have fitted into the bead hole and that would have given quite a secure hold as well as the glue. So next time I'll do that. I don't imagine windscreens last long in Gaslands, but luckily that pulls off quite easily with a pair of pliers, leaving the car looking even more cool than it did before. Trying this guy for size again now, you might be able to see that the steering wheel would be in the way if he had lower legs. And the same going for the back seats as well if you're considering putting passengers in there. It seems that Hot Wheels follow the same policy as Ryanair where it comes to legroom. And here you can see, just for size, the driver and crew all together. Now for the main weapon on this car, I'm again going to go for a Scratchbuilt flamethrower. This time coming at it from a different angle, so you can see that there is no right or wrong, especially with something like Gaslands. It's literally just using what you've got. I'm going to cut this length of zip tie and then glue this plastic tube onto the top. I'll trim them all so they kind of match the length of the bonnet. And for the gas canister on this one, I'm going to use this rounded end off that balloon stick that we got free earlier. The inconsiderate manufacturer left a nasty mold line on it, so I'm just going to sand that down to keep it nice and smooth. Then I'll trim it down and rest it in the back seat so it just looks like a gas canister that's just been plonked in there. Typical Gaslands disregard for any sort of health and safety. I'm going to use the headphone wire again for the pipe that connects the gas canister to the flamethrower. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And on the front of this vehicle, I want to put one of those hard things that it can use to hit other cars, whilst causing more damage to them and less to itself. So in order to form a nice secure ram that's fixed, damn it! So in order to create a ram that's fixed very firmly to the car with less chance for it breaking off, I'm going to use this soft cheese tub that we used the lid from earlier to make the flamethrower. You can see that this piece of plastic already has a nice firm right angle bent into it. And with some simple cutting away, this can easily be fixed to the bottom of the car, giving it extra strength and stability. Right now, it doesn't look too menacing. You can easily use those metal girder rams that I made for the last car on here. But for now, I'm going to use this spiky rubber ball that I think I use in pretty much all of my videos. It's made everything from elf hats, gas masks to traffic cones, and now rams for Gaslands cars. This glue cost me £1.20, and I am not throwing it away until I know every single last drop is out of it. Once you've shown the superglue who's boss, then just add your ram of choice, and you might end up with something that looks a bit like this. As stated, I've just used a piece of plastic tube. I can't remember where it's from, but that's going to be glued onto this length of zip tie here, and that's just to give it some extra strength. It's also just another little detail that makes it look a little bit less like a random piece of plastic stuck to a toy car. I also used a bit of granny grating to form, I guess, a kind of windshield to offer some protection to the driver. This is another thing that, since I've done the recording of this video, I've taken back off, and I think the car looks a lot better without. A lot of my builds wouldn't be complete without some random metal plates being attached to it, and that's what I'm doing here, just cutting out some plastic pieces again from that soft cheese tub, giving them a slight sand down just to help the glue and the paint stick to them. And using a pin to press in kind of rivets is a really simple way to add some great detail to the build, whether that be to a grimdark 40k setting or to Gaslands. It's a technique that works brilliantly. I like to glue the wheels on my Gaslands cars in place. That for me is the moment that it stops being a toy car and becomes a wargaming miniature, which in turn elevates me from being a 45-year-old man-child to a hobbyist. I'll admit I'm not at all keen on this new glue. Once it sets, it's brilliant, but until then, it's like something from Ghostbusters. Quickly skip through gluing this in place. Like I say, that's come off since I finished the video. And for the pilot light bit on this flamethrower, I'm just going to do exactly the same as the last one, only with a thin strip of plastic from that soft cheese tub instead of the metal from the paperclip. Regular viewers will know just how much I dislike painting, so from this point on, I'm just going to keep everything as quick and simple as I can. So I'm going to start off by giving literally everything just a base coat of brown. The driver and crew members, I'll just be adding random bits of colour to as I'm going without any kind of planning or forethought there. These riveted metal armour plates on the car are going to get the same level of forethought in just painting them some random colours, just so they're different from the main body of the car. Pro tip, I don't paint the whole plate. I leave some bits of brown showing through just to be dirt and rust. And as a workaround for the driver and crew's heads being larger than their bodies, we're just going to paint those to look like helmets. So for now, I'm just going to paint it a solid colour, and then at the end, once it's all dry, I'll use a black Sharpie marker just to draw on the visor, which is the same thing that I'm going to do for this buggy driver, as he's already got a moulded helmet on him. One thing that's always annoyed me with Hot Wheels, like not just as an adult now playing Gaslands, but as a child just playing with the Hot Wheels cars, is when the seats are chrome. Didn't make sense as a kid, doesn't make sense now. It's the main reason that I've drilled cars out before, so that I can paint the seats. But wouldn't you know it, with these seats being easily accessible, they're already black. Normally I'd be more than happy with that, but as I'm doing a video, I thought I'd better put a little bit of effort in, so I just gave them a slight dry brush. It looks brighter on this video than it actually does in real life. I gave this car a wet brush of ultramarine blue, making sure I left enough of the brown showing through to show that it's a dodgy paint job. And for no reason more than I've already got the paint out, I just used it for this panel on the back of the car as well. I've got the black paint out, so that's what colour this guy's helmet's going to be. And I'm going to use that black to paint the details inside the cockpit here. Normally I don't get to use the silver until a lot close to the end, but this project just feels like it needed it now. So I'm going over most of everything now with just a silver dry brush. These lamps on the front of the car here are quite an interesting feature, so I'll make sure I'll bring those out with the silver. And dry brushing over this awesome engine detailing on the inside of the cockpit here really does have some amazing details for something that you think no one's ever actually going to see. Just using this cheap mustard yellow to make my rubbish painting look like authentic post-apocalyptic wear and tear. Before I move on to something that's going to blow you all away, I'm actually going to try something arty. There's some absolutely awesome tutorials out there showing you how to paint flamer barrels so that it looks like they've taken heat damage and become discoloured. Obviously this isn't going to be one of those, but I will give you the highlights, pardon the pun. The gist of it is, once the barrel's dry brushed in silver, you should then add a brown wash along most of the length, which as you can see I haven't done here. You would then add a purple wash, slightly shorter than the length of the brown wash. And to finish off the effect, you would just add a very small amount of blue just around the very tip of the barrel. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but it's true, and don't let my painting here fool you. It actually does work. I suggest after this video, you go and check some of those tutorials out. And don't worry, you can thank me later. This is just more of me doing exactly that, so don't worry, you're not missing out on anything. Then I just want to touch up on some more of the details up in this cockpit, pay them the respect that the designer of this car deserves. Giving another coat of brown to the bottom of the car here. It was only a very cheap brown paint anyway, so it doesn't stick, especially to metal, very well. So giving it a second coat. Luckily, being Gaslands, everything looks like it's just coated in a thick layer of mud anyway, so that's the excuse I'm going with. And in doing that, I convinced myself that that's completely acceptable and logical. So I'm now going to paint just that same thick brown across the bottom of this car here, around the wheels, the mud guards, the underside, just anywhere that it looks like mud would have sprayed as it's been racing around. I try to be a bit artistic and make sure it's spraying in the direction that the wheels would be turning, that kind of thing, but it's more of an art than a science, and yeah, I'm not an artist. Obviously, if you call me an artist, that's up to you. You know, who am I to argue with that? Steady hands at the ready. I'm now just going to try and draw the visors onto the helmets of the drivers and crew here. And that didn't go too badly, the Sharpie even giving it a shiny kind of reflective coat. All of my time and effort in creating this little masterpiece would have been in vain if I didn't give it a black hole at the end. And where someone with more time and motivation might drill holes along the barrel, I'm just going to do some black dots here to represent them. It's a very passable representation if you squint from a long distance in the dark. And then breaking out the silver Sharpie. When I first got back into Wargaming, which was through Gaslands, I didn't have any tools or paints or bits box, so a lot of the extent of modding I could do on cars was literally with black, silver, and red Sharpies, like here where I'm highlighting the brake lights. Most coloured Sharpies over silver do give a reflective, shiny, metallic kind of look. The best way to do rust effects is dabbing it on with a sponge. So firstly, I would normally do a brown layer, but as these cars already have a lot of brown on them, I didn't see the point. Work smarter, not harder. Don't forget to like, follow and subscribe for more life advice just like that. So when you're doing this, you want to just tear off a randomly shaped bit of sponge so you don't have any straight edges on there. You want to make sure that sponge is fully loaded with orange or whichever paint you're going to be using, but then make sure you dab it so it is mostly dry. Once the brown is on and you are working on the orange layer, then really the subtlety is the key here. Less is more, as they say, and that's where I usually fall down. And I know the orange might look like it stands out quite a lot here. That's more the lighting that I'm using. It's the same with the blue on the tip of the flamethrower barrel earlier. In real life, they're a lot more subtle and not so obvious. But what I did realise when I came to do it on the orange is that it probably would have been worth doing all of the rust effects before I started painting the mud at the bottom of the car. And for some reason, that doesn't seem like me at all, I even decided to paint the visors with a paintbrush and paint and not a Sharpie. I would never choose paint over a Sharpie if the option was there. But somehow it worked. All the lines were straight. It seemed okay. I'm not going to get too cocky, but it's nice to know that the options are there. I've literally just remembered as I'm doing it, I tried to use the Sharpie, but for some reason it wasn't going over the white paint, of all things. It was getting a bit smudgy and clumpy. So there you go, that's why I used the black paint. And just for the record, it wasn't meant to look like the Stig. It's only at this point I realised it looked just like him. So from this point forth, this is going to be the driver. So I think now that this blue car is pretty much done, painting wise especially, so I'm just going to make sure it's all fitting together, everything looks okay, and then I'll glue that all in place. As discussed earlier, the axles now won't be able to go through the A-holes because of the size of the wheels, so I'm going to glue the axle straight to the base of the car. There are some little lumps and bumps on the car which I was able to use as kind of resting points for the axle to make sure it's all flat and just give it some extra surface to glue to. I was also planning that once the glue was applied, I was going to add the baking soda in order to give it that really hard, strong finish. But it turns out this disgusting slimy glue, as well as the thick gel super glue that I normally use when I'm doing these projects, both of them don't work with the bicarbonate of soda to kind of solidify and give that hard plastic feel that a lot of modelers use. It has worked and it is strong, but there is still just a slight bit of wiggle room on those two back wheels whenever I pick the vehicle up. Now it's time for the Stig to take his seat. I'll use some clever editing to cut out the bit where he's rolling around in the seats and then drops out the car completely. Luckily the rest of the crew went in quite simply. This glue really does take forever to dry. Just for the record, this isn't one of those crewmates from Among Us. And I couldn't think of any other way of making it clear that this is a gas canister that supplies the flamethrower, so I just simply wrote the word gas on it. And I'm just going to leave that lying casually in the back seat there. I guess in hindsight it would have been quite funny if I'd modelled a little seatbelt to go around it, just so it's not rolling around in the back. It's funny little details like that that really give the model character. And using a piece of that headphone wire like before just to represent the pipe that transporting the gas to the flamethrower. This end I'm just going to randomly tuck in there somewhere. Nobody can see what's going on down there, so that's fine. And that's all the detail I'm really going to do there. So this is the 3 crew and their gas canister ready to go. This spiky crashing device has plenty of area to be glued underneath the car to keep that on nice and secure. Gluing this paperclip pilot-like contraption in place onto the flamethrower's barrel. As I mentioned earlier in the video, with these larger wheels on the back, it has made the flamethrower point down slightly, which is a shame, so that's something to bear in mind. Where we cut the spoiler off the back of this car, it seems to already have holes that are perfect for these spiky metal girder type spikes to go on the back. And the tyre shredder doesn't need any more explanation, just glue that into the centre of the wheel. I use a cocktail stick just to add some black here to define the difference between the body and the arms, because I was too lazy at this point to go back and start adding shading and dry brushing. And the final touch is just to paint the name on using a cocktail stick and some white paint. I decided I'm going to call this car Razor, as in raise to the ground, burn it to the ground, as it's got a flamethrower. And also, like the pip earlier, I did later on cut those pipes down to make them less sticky uppy. For this one, trying to come up with a name that kind of takes the flamethrower on board as well, I decided to call it Fire Cruise, because it's got a flamethrower and it's got a crew of people, but they are just cruising, a fire cruise. So just to give you a last shot, a full 360 of the cars. This one looks a lot better once those pipes are cut down. The wheels, you can see them moving a little bit here, but the glue was still wet. But I do love the amount of detail on the interior. These guys looking pretty cool. They could have done with some kind of filler, maybe some glue or something just in those holes on the bead helmets, just to fill those holes in. Say this is one of the methods for making drivers. I'm going to bulk them up the next time I do this. A couple of ideas on how to do that. The mesh where the windscreen would be, I also took off because I didn't like that as well, and I think it looks a lot better now without that. You can see I've just smudged the paint, the name on the boots there. It's all over my finger. Typical me. Which just leaves us now to sit back, relax, and enjoy the fruits of our labour as the excited crowds gather round to scope out the competitors in tonight's race. It just leaves me time to say thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate that you've given your time to me, and I hope that you've taken something worthwhile from this video, whether that be practical tips, some inspiration, or at the very least, how not to do it. If you would consider giving this video a like, then I would really appreciate that too. It really means so much to me and the channel. If you haven't already subscribed, then please consider doing that also. Check out some of my other videos. I haven't actually done a lot on the channel about Gaslands, but I'm hoping I can get more of that coming now. The problem I'm having is that every day I'm having like another 10 brilliant ideas for videos. I just don't have the time to do them. We all know what it's like between work and family pressures, and that's really why I started this channel in the first place. I don't have the time or the money to be able to buy the top of the range, newest, coolest miniatures, but I don't want that to take away from the fact that I just love playing these games. It's a great way to just switch off the brain, forget about all those real world stresses, work, things like that. And I'm sure that's something that everybody watching can still relate to. So if you did enjoy this, I do have more Gaslands on the way. But until then, until next time, please look after yourselves, look after each other, and don't forget, always be cheap and easy.